Basically, these founders know something that others don't know. We don't necessarily fund quote unquote a science project. Software is quicker to build, quicker to monetize, quicker to commercialize, because you are essentially disrupting multiple industries by doing something like this. The government recently in the budget also came up with about I think it's a 10,000 crore fund of funds program to encourage venture capital funds to invest more in deep science and deep tech, right? But if you look at something across in the West, startups can get grants of hundreds of millions of dollars, right, from the government. You get such crazy ideas, but taking that to market is a very different ballgame. We do position ourselves to say that we can't keep taking moonshot after moonshot after moonshot of a bet, right? We believe that that nuclear fusion is like the holy grail of energy generation. I don't think quantum computers are the solution for anything and everything, right? Their job is not to replace classical computers. It is a little unfair to expect Indian startups to be as competitive to global startups at this point of time.
So let's talk about the interesting part, right? The deep tech fun part that you were mentioning about. How are these deep tech companies different from the normal companies? Yeah. And how is the investing different from the normal companies except for the long gestation period?
Yeah, I think how are these deep tech companies different from other companies? Essentially, they are building certain technologies that are fundamentally difficult to build. They're difficult to engineer. They're usually some level of IP, patents, or like a trade secret that is there. Basically, these founders know something that others don't know, right? In the sense that very few others would possibly know. And they're leveraging that unique insight to build something very useful for the customer, right? And these are technologies, like you said, will take a longer gestation period. It'll take a lot of time for you to build. And these are also technologies that cannot be replicated or duplicated overnight, right? Like just because you say that I want to build a flying car or a flying taxi, right? Just because you like or you are interested and you have a background in aerospace engineering or you've done aerospace engineering does not mean you can go out and build it, because building a plane is freaking hard. It does. Even if you have all the money, you still don't know how to build the best plane. You still won't be able to build the best plane because it will take so much time to build, right? Because it's so unique, it's so difficult, so on and so forth. Contrast that to something like, if you have to build today, if you want to build an app similar to a food delivery app of sorts, the technology stacks are reasonably available, easy for you to go, or a mobile app, right? Let's not even talk about a food delivery app. Let's just say you want to build a mobile app, right? Not so difficult to build, right? And if you want to monetize on that, then it's a very different game, because you have to figure out how to do marketing, how to do sales, so on. So that's the game to play. It's not technology building that's important. These will in deep tech, the technology building takes a lot of precedence and a lot of weightage, right? The belief is that what the problem that is being solved is a strong pain point in the industry. The value that the startup will bring in is so differentiated and unique that the customer will readily buy it if they are presented at the right price point as such, right? So, and by nature of what you are doing, because it's technologically unique, you figured out something to even reduce the price. Thereby, it's a very compelling proposition for the end customer altogether, right? So, that's essentially how the deep tech approach is. What we look at as deep science and deep tech are, we look at some technology stacks, like we've invested heavily in space tech. We have about 5 investments in that particular space. We look at climate tech also as having an overlap on what we call as deep tech. We look at areas like batteries and EVs and semiconductors and robotics, quantum, drones, life sciences and biotech, drug discovery. Those are all areas, a certain type of AI. All of that are essentially what constitutes deep tech for us.
Got it. And given the nature of investments that you make, I think all of them are heavily research focused, right? How do you make sure that the company doesn't get stuck up in a research phase for a very long time?
So typically in the companies that we invest, a fair bit of research has already been done. So we don't necessarily fund
an idea of research,
quote unquote a science project.
Okay.
Right. So, or a research project. Right. So that is what essentially the university system allows, academic institutions allow you to do. They allow you to take a topic and go deep dive on it and figure out, is there something relevant there at all? We come in at a stage when it is at the last stage of possibly the last 30% of R&D. A good chunk of it has already been done. To the extent that the way that we qualify it is to say the science risk has already been proven, right? Like as in somebody has already said that the science actually works, right? So there is enough evidence either in literature, in academia, in industry to say that something like this actually works from a physics perspective, from a science perspective, right? Perhaps the engineering is what is important. How do you take that science and make it engineer it to a certain type of a product or a certain type of a form factor, a certain type of an offering is what we look at and say, can this be done, right? And that is where we try to bring in the money. The research part usually ends up being done in academic institutions or somebody else has already done it, right? Taking that and building the final product. Like for example, we know 3D printing works. Right? It's already been proven in multiple cases. Now, what do you do with the technology like 3D printing becomes important. Do you go out and build a plastic 3D printer to say that to kind of build small components in academic institutions and so on? Is that what you're doing, or are you saying, okay, I want to use that 3D printer now to make metal parts? Right? Can I do metallic 3D printing? Can I do bio 3D printing? Now, people are using 3D printing to construct houses, right? So those are, while the technology stack is reasonably well known, what do you do with that technology stack becomes more interesting for us. The technology itself is something that academic institutions and research institutions solve for, right? So we come in at that stage and we evaluate how can this tech be leveraged to create a product that goes out and solves the customer's pain points. So our emphasis is more on the engineering part of the journey and less on the research part of the journey.
Got it. And given that they are deep tech projects, is there a chance that government policies is something that we should be actively looking at compared to the other products or startups that come up?
I think the government plays an extremely critical role in the evolution of research and development in the country, and specifically as the foundation on which deep tech startups can essentially build on. Why is this important, right? The government has access, the money and the resources to fund R&D in the country, right? Today, there are a lot of opportunities that are being made open by the current governments to enable this R&D to happen effectively, or at least creating the opportunity for this R&D to happen. Right? We have specific policies to encourage semiconductor design in the country, to encourage biotech innovations. Like there are grants that are being made available. Right? These are non-dilutive grants where you write a certain grant application, where a committee reviews it and finds whether this is something that is worth investing in or not, whether worth giving a grant or not, right? And this grant can range from a few lakhs to a few tens of lakhs, sometimes even a few crores, sometimes actually even a few tens of crores, right? So all these funding mechanisms have been made available today. Common areas, like I said, that have reaped the benefit of these sort of grants: defense innovations, semiconductors, biotech, a little bit of space tech as well, a little bit of now, as of a couple of days ago, even some interest in some support for building language models, LLMs from India, so on and so forth. The government recently in the budget also came up with about I think it's a 10,000 crore fund of funds program to encourage venture capital funds to invest more in deep science and deep tech. Right. The context for this is that historically in India, VCs have not necessarily invested in deep tech hardware. Deep tech in general, more so in deep tech hardware. Right. It's not been the most favored opportunity of investment, and rightfully so in a way, because in a country of 1.3 billion people, the things like fintech and consumer have a lot of appeal in terms of how it can cater to 1.4 billion people, right? And now it is becoming more and more interesting for funds to invest in deep science and deep tech, especially over the past 5-6 years or so, right? A lot of things are kind of aligning in the sense that we are seeing a lot of good talent that is available and that is more risk taking to build hardware in India. Internet is now much more easily accessible to people so that they can do a lot of research that is out there. We are seeing a lot of founders a lot of people who have studied abroad want to come back to India and no longer want to just work in an MNC as such. They want to build something themselves. A lot of academic institutions are now, professors and students are becoming more entrepreneurial, right? They're asking themselves, why should I just do research and publish papers? Why can't I take this research and commercialize it and take it to the market, right? So PhD students, postdoc students, professors in IITs and IISc and so on are all spending a lot of time in building these sort of technology stacks, or if they've already built something, figuring out a way how to take that technology stack to the market, right? In addition to all this, the government being vocally supportive and actually investing money is something that's extremely important in the initial stages. Because even the fact, when we talked earlier about incubators and accelerators, we also talked about grants, right? And that grant today, the government is a large stakeholder in ensuring those grants come in, because with those grants you can go to a VC, and with those grants you can build something that becomes interesting for a VC or a private investor to come in.
Got it. And when you're looking at a portfolio, when you're building a portfolio, right, there is a component of risk which is associated with all the startups that you have on your portfolio. So looking at deep tech, all of them are risky, right? How do you hedge?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. We've done it. We've been a little, we've tried to balance it out by investing both in hardware and software, right? So historically, if you look at our first and second funds, about 50%, anywhere between 40 to 50% of our investment will be in software companies as against hardware companies, right? Mm-hmm. So why is this balancing needed, right? Software is quicker to build, quicker to monetize, quicker to commercialize. These are, by the way, these are still difficult to build software platforms. It's not the same as building a CRM platform or a tracking platform. So these are still infrastructure heavy, compute heavy platforms that are being built, right? But even with that, compared to hardware, these have smaller gestation periods, right? So you can build faster and take it to the customer faster, make quicker revenues, and you can possibly grow and scale much quicker. And those are also companies today that can get acquired fairly quickly because they have a product, they have revenue, so on and so forth. So the hedging is today, in a way, is to split between hardware and software investments. But keeping that aside, even in hardware, we do position ourselves to say that we can't keep taking moonshot after moonshot after moonshot of a bet, right? You can support a few such investments, but you also have to balance it out by saying that you will invest in certain types of technologies where the tech stack is fairly mature, right? And they are, let's say, 2 years away from commercialization, as against that moonshot, which will be 5 years away from commercialization, right? Or maybe not even 2 years, maybe even lesser, right? So you will do a certain amount of investments that are in that category. right? The other layer here is to say, when can you do a certain type of, there's no formula here, but one more lens to take is to say, in what time of deployment of the fund can I make what type of investments? I'll break that down a little bit, right? For example, biotech, especially development of new drugs and new drugs, takes an extremely long period of time. Right? It usually the time to market from initial research for you to develop that drug, then put it in animal trials, then do certain preclinical trials, animal trials, then you do phase 1 clinical trials, phase 2 clinical trials, phase 3 clinical trials, get the FDA approval or the CDSU approval, depending on what that drug is, can easily take over 8 to 10 years, right? So if I do this investment, as I said earlier, we are a 10-year, 8 plus 1 plus 1, 8 plus 2 year fund. So out of those 8 years, if I'm doing that investment in the 4th year of my fund, right, then the journey of the startup will outlive my fund itself, right? I am better off making that sort of an investment in the 1st year of my fund, as against the 4th year. That does not mean I will not do it in the 4th year. I should not do it in the 4th year, right? None of that is true. I can deploy at whatever point in time, but the risks are different when you do it in the 4th year. I wouldn't even actually say it as risks. What is important? What is how to manage that investment is different when you do it in the 4th year vis-a-vis when you do it in the 1st year, right? So given all of this, the timeline at which you are making a certain investment also comes in. This is also a part of the portfolio construction. And when are you best positioned to do a certain type of investment as against the others, right? So we do, to long story short, software versus hardware. Looking at hardware, even within the hardware stack, looking at innovations that are, few of them will be moonshot, a larger amount of them will be closer to commercialization, a few of them will be in between. They might take 3 years for commercialization as against 1 year, right? So you will try to balance all of that out and thereby kind of try to diversify your or hedge your bets across this.
Got it. And I'm sure you would have received a lot of pitches or ideas, or I'm sure you must have come across some ideas which you think are scientifically brilliant, but have no market penetration at the moment, or there is no market right now. What do you do in that case?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's very difficult. It's tough to handle those sort of situations, right? Because you know that this looks amazing, but perhaps you can't see it being adopted, right? Like somebody talked about a couple of years ago, someone whom I met talked about wanting to build a tool that is essentially the vision was to go gadget free, right? So essentially you should not have gadgets at all, right? Everything is just like you have a ring or you have some sort of a device where all your gadgets are essentially in the digital world, right? Like you click a certain thing on your eyepiece or something, and you have your mobile phone in your hand, right? You have a certain digital version of your mobile phone. You can do whatever you want that you're doing in the physical world, but it entirely translates into the digital world, right? That was super exciting, right? Now, but how do I necessarily see that translating into a product today, and what is the market for, and that was not even a business use case, right? Like the founder was talking about taking it to people like you and me, right? Within the next few years. It was very difficult for us to kind of, really wrap our heads around how this is going to be possible, because you are essentially disrupting multiple industries by doing something like this, right? Then you ask yourself, okay, has the founder, see, this is exciting. That is just because it seems so visionary and far-fetched does not mean that you have to dismiss it. Then you ask yourself, okay, why is the founder thinking like this? Like, what has he learned? What has he understood? He or she understood to kind of make this have this vision, right? Then you ask yourselves, okay, has someone else done something or attempted to do something like this in the West, Do you see enough examples? If you see something like that, then okay, you get some level of confidence to say, okay, this is the path that they have followed to get to somewhere. Maybe it's not the final product, but this is milestone A, milestone B, milestone C, so on and so forth. Then when you have some sense of that, then you'll say, okay, are these the right guys to do this? Yes, they have a vision, but is vision alone sufficient, right? Because it's not very difficult today. With all due respect, it's not very difficult for you to have an idea. How are you going to execute it becomes extremely important. Then the capabilities of the founder, the team become extremely important, right? You add those lenses, right? Like for example, I keep telling to a few folks in my circle that in my head, like I have this idea to say that there should be one piece of clothing that's the only piece of clothing that I should have. Why should I have a wardrobe, right? Why should I have a bunch of clothing in the wardrobe? That one ubiquitous cloth should be something where I should be able to change colors. I should be able to convert it to a shirt, to a kurta, to a pant. Like, why should it matter? Like all these things, like, okay, leather is a different material, cotton is a different material, but in cotton, I should be able to change it from a kurta to a shirt, to a blue shirt, to a black shirt. Like, why isn't something like that possible today? Right? That's my idea. But am I the right person to execute it? No, not really. I have no idea why it doesn't work or why it should not. That doesn't stop me from ideating, right? But I really wish somebody does that, because I think that would solve a lot of problems for me personally in life and for a lot of people, right? So you get such crazy ideas, but taking that to market is a very different ballgame. And so yeah, I think that was definitely an interesting one that we came across. This is the example that we'll see a lot of others, right? But this is an example where I thought the vision was so. I'm giving this example because it's something that we all can understand. Right? Some of these things can become very technical when somebody says, I will be able to do, I'll build a semiconductor chip that can do something very specific, or a drug that can solve for something that has never been done before. All those are supremely exciting in their own ways, right? But this example is something that all of us can easily relate to, right? And which is why I just thought I could talk about that.
Got it. And because you're closer to this space, where is the deep tech innovations in terms of nuclear fusion or quantum computer heading? Like, are we seeing enough market for it in India, or are we closer to using it in everyday life?
Fusion, we recently invested in a fusion company, so we are definitely optimistic about it. So we made that investment in October of 2024, so less than about 4 or 5 months old at this point of time. So we believe that that nuclear fusion is like the holy grail of energy generation. It's a way to get extremely high levels of clean energy with very minimal investments comparatively, right? So the potential is like I keep saying this, that this is unlimited energy, right? Like that's what nuclear fusion promises, right? This is unlimited energy. Imagine the things that you can do, right? And we sometimes don't associate it that way, but in my head, if you have unlimited energy, you can solve for education, you can solve for poverty, you can solve for unemployment, because you're not worried about where will I get energy from, right? Everyone has access to energy as much as they want, right? So fusion is definitely the holy grail. Are we closer to fusion at this point of time than we were 10 years ago? I believe so. Is it something that we will see happening in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years in a way that we can all embrace it and within touching distance for us? Maybe a little more tougher, but there is no, again, for something like fusion, there's no question of like a market as such. Everyone needs energy. Focus is important, right? Of whom do you go and sell it to is still yet to be cleared out. But I think that's a question that can be parked for 3, 4, 5 years from now, because at this point of time we don't even have the technology sorted out, right? So those questions are a little too premature in my view in terms of nuclear fusion. Quantum, on the other hand, has, in fact, interesting that you mentioned both quantum and nuclear in the same breath, because they've both been technologies that have, like for the past 30 years, have been always 10 years away, right? Or at least for the past 50 years, they've always been 10 years away. Somebody's saying, okay, this will come in the next 10 years. We are just there. We are just there. A few more things we'll get it, but it has evaded us for quite some time. But I think what is What's very interesting in all these is, again, it's important to factor in what AI can unlock in a lot of these things, right? Not necessarily impacting quantum computing per se, but just that it can accelerate the development process much more easily. A lot of simulations that you should have done to develop certain quantum technology stacks can now be accelerated using AI. So what would have possibly taken 10 years otherwise can now, you can shrink that timeline. By how much, I don't know. I'm not someone who understands the space very effectively, but the potential is there for us to accelerate some of these technologies. But a broader statement on quantum, especially on the computing side, is that I don't think quantum computers are the solution for anything and everything, right? They're not going to, their job is not to replace classical computers. Their job is to do certain things that classical computers are not capable of. You don't need quantum capabilities for anything and everything that we do, right? Our laptops don't need quantum systems, not computing systems, right? They are there to accelerate certain drug discovery processes, certain material discovery processes, which are certain types of simulations, weather modeling, where today doing something like this takes a large amount of compute, large amount of time, energy, costs, so on and so forth. If you're able to shrink those, then you unlock so many possibilities otherwise, right? So I don't think quantum is a tech that all of us will embrace necessarily in that sense on a day-to-day basis, but it doesn't have to be that sort of a technology either. I think we're still a little away from quantum. There's a lot of investments that are going in. Microsoft came up with a new chip, quantum chip, about a month and a half ago. So there is, you will see these developments happening all the time, but I think as investors, we are always optimists. We are rational optimists, where we always hope that these technologies come in, but we are also saying, okay, if they're 10 years away, they're 10 years away, right? We got to be intellectually honest and plan your investments accordingly, right? So that's the way that I would look at it.
Got it. And we are primarily talking about Indian markets, right? But do you think Indian deep tech startups right now are globally competitive, or is there something which is holding us back? And if there is anything, what is it?
Are we? I think it's a good question. We should the basis for this is, it's important to understand that the Indian deep tech ecosystem, for all, especially on the investing side, investing thereby supporting startups, is for all practicality about 5 years old, right? If not lesser, right? So it is a little unfair to expect Indian startups to be as competitive to global startups at this point of time, because one, they've not had enough time. Two, as I mentioned earlier, investor appetite for deep tech has also not been very high, which means that not a lot of money has gone in. The government also has only now, over the past few years, about 3-4 years, started encouraging / putting money in these grant programs to encourage deep tech startups. But if you look at something across in the West, startups can get grants of hundreds of millions of dollars, right, from the government, right? So it's not a level playing field in that sense. But very honestly, it will never be a level playing field, because somebody will always be playing catch up, right? Having known all this, do we still have a game to fight, a game to play, and a battle to fight? I think the answer is yes, right? Do we have are we capable of, are we building products that are superior to, that are at least capable of competing with global products? I think the answer is absolutely yes, no question about that. Do we as an ecosystem, do we have the capabilities of selling these products effectively? I think the answer is yes, but it comes with a lot of caveats. My personal view is that Indian, especially on the deep tech founders, deep tech ecosystem, the founders are not so great at storytelling, right? I think that's a certain gap that we are seeing at this point of time, and this is not related to any particular sector also, right? It's not like a certain sector of founders are facing that sort of a problem. I think it's a very ubiquitous problem, typically because as a nation also we are not people who communicate vision very effectively, right? right? Of course, a bunch of people do, but for the most of us, we talk about things as they are, right? Like we tell that this is what we do, or we don't necessarily go out there and exaggerate in that sense, right? So setting vision and talking about and storytelling doesn't necessarily come very easily for us, and we've constantly observed that founders in the West have a stronger knack for telling a great story, right? And that I think can be some sort of a friction point for an Indian founder if they have to compete with global startups with a startup in the US. See, because our ecosystem today is not so deep in terms of funding especially for deep tech startups, there will come a point in time, or there is already a point in time in the growth of a startup where they have to go beyond India and raise capital from outside of India. At that point of time, if you're going to the Silicon Valley and you are pitching your particular idea, how do you stand out amidst possibly 10 other companies who are doing something similar or thereabouts to what you're doing, right? And perhaps they may not have the greatest of products, but perhaps they have had more access to capital than you have. Perhaps they are able to tell better stories than you have. Perhaps they already have a bunch of customers who are trying out their particular product and thereby confidence is high, so on and so forth, right? So you are competing, you are expected to compete, your right to win should be very clear, right? Should be established very clearly. And why is India best positioned to solve this at a global scale? And why are you the best person from India to solve this at a global scale? I think that story has to come out much more effectively at this point of time. Are we getting better? The answer is absolutely yes. Are we there yet? The answer is no. Right? But I'm encouraged every time I see founders now, because they're also learning, right? They're learning. There are so many YouTube videos available where people are talking, where other founders have pitched. They see how the pitch happens. How do you pitch in 2 minutes? How do you pitch in 10 minutes? How do you pitch in 30 minutes? Or how do you do 4-hour long conversations? All these things, you have some information available on the internet, right? There are a lot of interviews. Again, people, Y Combinator puts out a lot of these materials, but essentially the opportunity to learn is extremely high right now. The access to internet, access to technology is extremely high. Only question is the founder also thinking along similar lines, right? We've also seen, because especially in deep tech, we've seen founders essentially say, hey, if I build a great product, somebody will come and buy it, right? Like, people will automatically come and buy it. Why would they not buy my product? Yeah, but they will not buy your product unless you go out and sell it and you make an effective case as to why your product is better than any other product that is out there in the market for that particular customer, right? So as a CEO, as a founder, you need to be able to tell great stories, right? You need to be able to, actually, storytelling goes beyond the customer. You have to tell stories for your investors. You have to tell the right story for your team members, because you have to constantly motivate them for the larger goal. You have to tell stories. You have to do your storytelling bit for your vendors and suppliers, because how else do you negotiate better prices? How else do you tell them that, hey, I am going to do 10,000 units of sales next year, so you need to trust me and give me the pricing for 10,000 units and not 100 units which I'm going to procure in month 1, because by month 8 I will be taking 5,000 units, right? So from 100 to 5,000 I will grow. You need to take my word for it, or I need to tell you a convincing story to take you from here to there. So I think storytelling in general is a little bit of a white space, actually a fair bit of a white space in the Indian context.
Got it. And with respect to someone watching this podcast, right? If there is a young engineer watching this podcast and they would want to build something in the deep tech space, what would your suggestion for them be?
What
should they build? What should they build?
They should build something that the customer wants. That's all I would say, right? You should primarily build something that.
And how do they get to know what do the customer want?
Today, it's important to identify problem statements that are out there, right? Like, sometimes we are not expecting. I think if you're a biotech engineer and if you want to build space tech, may not be the right fit. Like, if you're a biotech engineer, would you your strengths are possibly best utilized building something in biotech, right? Now then you have a certain type of an expertise, right? Or a certain area of interest. See if there is a certain problem statement that is out there in the industry that people are struggling to solve for, right? Essentially, you have to play to your strengths, right? And you do that by speaking to various stakeholders. You speak to people in academia. You speak to people in the broader industry, right? If you're in biotech, let's say, you speak to someone in biocon. You speak to a big pharma company, right? So speak to people there and understand what sort of problem statements are they seeing, right? And where is it, and try to get, and like I told earlier about, the priority stack. If there are 10 problems that you're facing, then what are your top 3 problems, right? And it's not enough to speak to one customer, but you speak to 50 customers, right? And say that this is what I've spoken to 50 customers. In fact, I love to see founders put that on a pitch deck, right? To say, you start off your pitch deck and say, don't put the usual problem slide and give me 5 points to say this is what is happening, right? Like, let's say again that EV use case, everyone will say, okay, EVs are catching fire, EVs don't have enough range, charging time is high. Those 3, 4, 5 points, you can get that from any news article, you can get that in any report from one of the consulting firms. So that's what that is. But what do you, as a founder who wants to spend the next 8 to 10 years building in this particular space, what do you know that others have not figured out, right? What do you know that those news articles have not figured out? That can only happen when you speak to customers. So if you're putting your first problem slide and your first slide and saying, hey, I've spoken to 50 customers. This is the number one problem that they are facing, right? And this is what they are willing to pay for. I am building this particular solution to solve that particular problem. That's the way that, that's the storyline that one should be going for, right? What it allows you to do is that it allows you to validate a problem statement, right? Sometimes you may go to the market thinking that you have a problem, right? That you think that it is a problem. One person may say it's a problem, but there will be 9 others who will say that this is not a problem for me, right? So thereby basing something on just one interview, one customer conversation is not going to be sufficient. So spending a lot of time on understanding problems, I think is extremely important. I love founders. Personally, I love founders who understand problem statements really well, right? Because and they're not necessarily, because if you understand problem statements well, you will know, you can only understand that well if you have spoken to a lot of people. You have an understanding of what is happening in the market. You have an understanding of what is happening with respect to regulations, with respect to commercial competition. You need to know so many things to understand that there are problems in the ecosystem, right? But if you're going by the way to say that, hey, I know a particular technology because I've done a PhD in it, and then you're saying, okay, let me find a way to use this technology to solve a particular problem. It's not a bad approach, but that has to be supported through all of these, understanding of the problem statement as such. In terms of sectors today, I think I would suggest it's best to avoid sectors where there are already 20, 30, 40, 50 people already building, right? And the way that the world is innovating, the pace at which the world is innovating at this point of time, it might be very difficult to play catch up, right? So it's best to identify certain types of white spaces in the industry, in the world where you can focus on, right? Personally, I think we have a lot of excitement, at least in India today, with the Indian lens. We have a lot of excitement around semiconductors today. We have a lot of excitement in photonics, in life sciences and biotechnology, defense technologies, robotics and automation, and and new types of materials, right? Materials, nanomaterials, composites, quantum technologies. These are areas where we think that there is still so much of value to be unlocked, right? It's still there, right? People have not spent enough time on it. And of course, with the advent of AI, how can AI be leveraged to solve certain types of use cases in, let's say, in healthcare, in biotech, in material discovery? All these segments which we have traditionally looked at without the AI, how can those segments be, either technology can be improved or it can be accelerated, development can be accelerated. The advent of AI, it's like, I personally am super excited about AI in robotics, right? Like how do you take AI, which has been predominantly or entirely so far in the digital domain, on a computer, on a screen, in zeros and ones. How do you take that to the physical domain, right? Like how do you take AI to improve robots, improve cars, right? Things that so far have been controlled, or they have been manually controlled or operated today. How can you make them think on their own? How can you make them perceive things around them and become more intelligent, right? I think which the domain, or the word that's commonly used to describe this is called as physical AI, right? So how do you take AI from the digital world and put it in the realm of actual physics, right? So that for me is like that's something that I am supremely excited by. And my personal belief is, of course, I am parroting some great leaders across the world, but I think it has the potential to be a very, very large market opportunity going forward. This will unlock things like autonomous cars, humanoid robots, and so on and so forth. Right? This is a technology stack that can enable that to happen.
Got it. One question that I missed previously is when we have meetings with startups, right? Like after investing, how often do you have touch point with the startups, or do you have something which is recurring?
Yeah. So post-investment, because we come in as a very early investor, especially in deep science and deep tech, founders may not necessarily come from a background in business, in strategy, and so on and so forth. And even otherwise, we spend a lot of time working closely with the founders. We usually have a couple of touch points, at least active touch points, proactive touch points monthly, which is to say that we have one monthly catch-up call. That can be either face to face or over a video call to understand essentially the performance of the previous month. Right. So we usually do this within the first 10 days of a month to understand the performance of the previous month. We try to understand what has been the development on the technology stack, what has been the progress on business conversations, how has the team grown, are we seeing any sort of how is the financial health of the company? Have you spent more than what you should have? Basically, a calibration of where you stand vis-a-vis the business plan that you had initially set out. Right? You wanted to do 2-3 things in month one. Did you achieve those 3 things, or has it slipped to month 2? Why has it happened? How can we ensure that we not do something like this in the future? Or how can we stick to plan versus actual mapping is what essentially happens. Then at least once in 45 days, we try to spend face-to-face time with the founders, where it's not a reporting meeting. It's more to spend time with them to casually understand what is their view on the company, how is it progressing, is there anything that they specifically need help on, so on and so forth, right? Aside from that, we have WhatsApp groups with each of these founders where we share market insights, any other startups that have raised capital in a similar domain, in a similar space, not just in India, but outside of India as well. Any investors that we've seen that are showing interest in a particular, these type of startups per se, someone who we can target for the next fundraise. Or let's say certain industry developments that are happening, certain regulatory things. We are also constantly learning. We are looking out for to learn more about that particular space, and we share those learnings and insights with the founders as well, right? So then, of course, on a need be basis, if something is not going well, and the startups, the founders essentially come to us and say, hey, we face this particular problem. This particular key employee is leaving the organization. We need to quickly find a replacement. So then you have to rally up and see, how you can, gather more people, or rather spread the word out and get more applications for them to, review, so on and so forth. Or you look into your own network and see if there is someone whom you can recommend for that particular role. Or it can be, let's say, something has gone wrong. For example, in January, in second week of January, there was a fire at one of our portfolio companies' labs, right? So then you got to figure out, okay, you got to work with them very closely to see, okay, is anyone injured? Has there been certain loss of certain facilities or certain lab equipments? certain documentation, then how do you support them? Is there insurance coverage? Should we get someone to, let's say, possibly, do you have to move to a new facility, right? Which means, can we help you figure out a new facility, so on and so forth, right? So those are certain remedial measures that then is more capital needed, right? Like, okay, something has gone wrong, a fire has happened, you lost a lot of property, then you have to maybe restore all those things back, so it will cost you a lot of money. So money that you had earmarked for the next 1 year, suddenly you have to spend a lot of it on things that you had previously spent on, so your runway goes down from 12 months to possibly 8 months. So what does this mean? Do you need more capital? Do you have to go out and fundraise? So all these things are on a as need basis, right? So yeah, I think that's how our touch points usually play out.
Understood. Okay. So globally, we see there's a lot more focus these days on sustainability and renewable energy and stuff, right? From an investor standpoint, how do you think venture capital funding is more inclined towards sustainability these days, or is it even heading in that direction?
I think there has been definitely a strong interest in investing in technologies that will help combat climate change, right? In multiple ways and forms, right? Some of them might be, things like different packaging materials or more sustainable packaging materials, right? Or it can be, let's say, can you do carbon capture? Can you have better batteries? Can you have your fuels made from through biological processes and not through petrochemical or chemical-based processes, right? So it takes different forms, right? But I think the key motivator for investors will still be to see if these are businesses that can make money, right? Sustainability is important, and we see that and we would see that as a large market opportunity. But fundamentally, the business still has to make sense. You still need to be building something that the customer values, right? It can't be, today, because of how certain technologies are so commercialized, or so, let's take an example, for example, spoons, right? Now, we use stainless steel spoons, which are not a problem, right? They're not necessarily environmentally bad. But plastic spoons to be replaced by wooden spoons or spoons made by something else, those all have to match the price points that a plastic spoon has to offer, right? Or then you're targeting some very different segments of the society, right? You're not targeting the mass market. You're suddenly targeting only a certain set of people who can afford to pay more for those sort of products, right? So it's okay even if you're doing that, but does that business make sense? Can you still make enough money through a business like that, where you're not catering to 1.4 billion people in the country, but you're catering to only about 100 million people in the country, right? Or even lesser, 10 million people in the country. Okay. So does a business still make sense becomes extremely important. That is a primary factor for a VC to invest, right? Sustainability is an important metric, but it cannot be the only reason why. Just because you're a company that's building something on the sustainability track as such, does not mean that you become a great business. It has to be a great business at first, with the added flavor of it being or combating climate change or building something sustainable.
Got it. And you've been in VC industry for quite some time, right? How do you see it evolving for next 10 years, let's say? What do you think will change?
I think in India specifically, we will see a lot more people investing in startups. A number of startups are expected to grow because, in general, the risk appetite of Indians is increasing at this point of time. We thereby creating more opportunities for investors to put money in. Because India is a growing economy at this point of time, there will be a lot more interest for people to invest in startups because the economy itself is growing as such. There will also be a lot more interest from outside of India to invest in Indian markets, right? Which may not have been very heavy at this point of time from a startup funding perspective, right? So we'll see, I think, more of foreign capital coming to India at this point. We will also see that the current set of startups that have been invested in, especially on deep science and deep tech, will start maturing, right? You will see that these would be businesses that can they're not just taking large amounts of capital, spending a lot of time building something, but they're also building something that the customers can use. So people will start using these products. Revenue models will start evolving, right? And at the same point of time, you will also see scaling up of these businesses happening. You will also see exits take more shape and form, right? Today we don't have an exit playbook for deep tech in India, right? But over the next 10 years, you will see exits happening. So people will know, okay, for a space tech startup, if I'm starting a space tech startup today, then over the next 8 to 10 years, if I do A, B, C, different things, then this is the exit that I can possibly get at that point of time. You have some playbook, you have some roadmap that you can go after today, which was not there, something. So we think that will evolve. And what that means is that investors will also get confidence, right? Not just entrepreneurs, but investors will also say, okay, if I do this, if I invest in deep tech, yes, you might not possibly get an exit in 3-4 years, but you will probably get an exit in 7-8 years, right? And thereby you can structure your funds accordingly, right? To accommodate for deep tech. Today we are seeing a larger funds who have previously been more generalist in their approach, now starting to focus more on deep tech, right? We think that opportunity, that proportion will also improve, right? The amount of money that is going into deep tech in India will also increase over a period of time, and the proportionality with which it is happening today will also improve, because people will get more and more confidence by seeing some early success stories that are coming in.
Lovely. So I think I've covered all the long answers that I had, but I want some quick fun answers from you as well.
Done.
Are you ready for those?
Let's do it.
We'll call the section as behind the scenes of being a VC.
Okay.
First thing is, what's the most exciting part of your job?
The possibility of getting to meet some amazing entrepreneurs building some extremely wacky ideas every single day is amazing. Like, I've been in Bangalore all my life, like 7-8 kilometers from where I've stayed all my life. People are building some incredibly amazing things in satellites, in planes, in electric vehicles, in batteries. For about 27 years of my life, I had absolutely no clue that all these were happening. When I first got into VC, that was the thing that really hit me. Like, what was I doing all this while, right? Like, I'm speaking to some amazing people. That's what keeps you going. VC is a long-term game, right? Because you don't know if the investment that you have pushed or the investment that you have made is going to be really successful until at least a few years. So how do you constantly keep yourself motivated to keep doing it every single day, right? And that only comes if you are innately curious, that you really like these people, that you really enjoy these conversations that you have. So I think that's the energy that I feed off every single day.
Got it. And what's the hardest decision that you've ever made in VC so far?
I think the first time that I had to communicate to a founder after spending like 4 or 5 months evaluating them, telling them that I'm sorry, we'll not be able to go through this, right? That was tough. Like,
is that how long it usually takes for?
No, not really. You should also remember that I was much early in my journey. So I was also not best equipped in a way, but it usually takes much lesser than that. But for me to communicate that to the founder, of course, it was over a video call, but even then, like, I still remember now that, I was just shrinking, and you could see the founder, like, almost like you could see the sadness in their face, like, but it is what it is. But that was tough.
Okay, so now what is the deal that you're most proud of, at least until now?
So I was a part of an investment that we made in a company that's essentially building technologies to repair satellites in space, to extend the life of satellites in space. We made that investment, I think, in early 2022. They've been able to do reasonably well, build out, actually exceed expectations in terms of building out the tech stack, growing the team, getting some commercial orders, getting validation from various stakeholders. I think, that's been extremely exciting. That's a deal that I've been a part of. But aside from that, I think there have been a number of companies in the portfolio that were the investments where either I have not been a part of those investments, my colleagues have been a part of those, and perhaps were also done even before I joined the firm, that have done exceedingly well in my view. So it's a collective portfolio that we're extremely proud of supporting these entrepreneurs and what they're building.
Lovely. Okay. If someone wants to become a VC, how do they start, or what do they do?
First question is to answer, why do you really want to do this? I think understanding motivations is extremely important. Your own motivations are extremely important. Like I said, I think VC is a long-term game. It's not something where you will see it has delayed gratification, right? You really don't know whether you're doing the right thing until for a very long time, relatively speaking, for a very long time. So if you're comfortable with things like that, delayed gratification, then it makes a lot of sense. I think you got to be curious all the time, right? It's just there's no stopping, right? You got to be always alert. You should want to learn more, keep understanding new things, new ideas, technologies, so on and so forth. I would say that keep oneself updated on what's happening in the market, in the ecosystem with respect to funding, startup funding, who is doing what in this particular space. Read a lot, right? Like be on Medium and Reddit, watch videos on YouTube, podcasts, listen to podcasts. All those things I think are extremely important. More importantly, I would say is you need to be able to understand people, right? Like especially have a deep sense of empathy, right? You're working with founders who are devoting possibly the prime years of their life to do something that's extremely challenging, extremely hard. And more often than not, they're doing it for the first time. They're building a startup for the first time. They are speaking to investors for the first time. They're raising capital for the first time. They're handling a team for the first time, right? And they run into complications every single day. The house is on fire all the time. Somebody has some problem at any given point of time, right? The least that you can do is be empathetic to the troubles that they're going through. And when they need support, you got to be there, right? So understanding, and for all of this, you also need to, prior to all this, you need to understand whether they are really motivated to this, because the journey is extremely long and extremely hard. So understanding people, your being empathetic, I think is a trait that is extremely important to be in venture capital.
Got it. Okay. So if you could randomly invest in some random industry outside of deep tech, in which industry would you invest?
Outside of deep tech, okay. I've been extremely passionate about solving for education in this country, right? Whether that's the tech way, is tech the right way to, or tech the only way to do it or not, is secondary. But I think solving for education is something that's extremely close to my heart. I believe that solving for education will have an extremely disproportionate levels of a domino effect of sorts on everything else, right? And I think that's the one true way of really achieving taking the country to greater heights, to improve the standard of living of people, to remove gender biases, to remove caste biases, religion biases. All these things will fall in place if we have a robust education system in place. First of all, making it accessible to everyone, and second of all, to teach them skills that will really help them in their later lives. So I think my even more than money, I think at some point of time in the future, I really hope that I would be able to devote sufficient amount of time to work on that, to work on solving for education in the country.
Got it. Okay, so if you could fund a sci-fi technology from a random movie that you would pick and make it real, which one would you pick and why?
I don't know. I've always been. I mean, very recently, at least this is at the top of my head. I would love to solve for teleportation. Right. I would love to be in.
Is that because of Bangalore traffic?
No, not really. I think just the possibility of, now that you mention it, yes, but I think mobility unlocks a lot of things in society, right? It's you are fundamentally I mean, over a period of time, or if you look back over the centuries, I think mobility has been one of the main reasons why development has happened. Like the ability for people to move from one place to another, which has been solved over a period of time through whatever, to bullock carts, to cars, through trains and flights and so on and so forth. Just enabling people to move from a place with less accessibility to a place of, where facilities are available, I think can solve a lot of things, right? Like today, if you were to, like, we have an investment in the company called in a company called the E-Plane company, that's building flying taxis for urban mobility, right, to take you from here to the airport in 20 minutes, right, at the cost of an Uber, whatever, like an Uber Go or something, right? So what if you could do that, right? Like, what if you could go from here to the airport? How much of value would it unlock?
Absolutely.
Right? How much possibilities would open up because of that? Can I make that? Can I make that trip to a certain part of country that I have never done before, because I know there is a startup there, but I'm just like so hesitant to go there because it's just so much of travel time. It's just so much of my day that's getting sucked in, of my week that's getting sucked in. So that's just my example. But imagine someone living in rural India wanting to look for an opportunity in a tier 1 city, and if you could today, the reason why you may not be doing this is because you can't travel from a village to a city on a daily basis, so you have to come and live in a city. And if you have to live in a city, the rents are exorbitantly high, right? And you possibly end up spending a lot of whatever you're earning on your accommodation, on your food, and so on and so forth. But I think if you're able to travel from one place to another within a matter of seconds, I think that would be absolutely fascinating.
Now that you mention it, sounds very interesting.
I think it unlocks so many different things. So I hope we solve for it someday.
All right. So, is there some book or movie that has influenced the way you look at business and investing in a specific way?
I think for me, that was more of okay. I look at this a little differently. For me, less of books, but less of investing and business. But I would say how I think about myself in terms of processes and habits was extremely important for me. And in a way, I felt that reading Atomic Habits back in 2021 was extremely important, because it allowed me to tangibly do a lot of things. It was not very out in the air. It wasn't gyan. There was a lot of tangible stuff, right? Which I really appreciate, because I subscribe to James Clear's newsletter, Thursday newsletter. It comes in every Thursday. So I think he conveys it in such a form that was very consumable for me at that point of time where I was in life, and I got to implement that on a regular basis, and I think it has really helped me refine how I think and approach various aspects of life, and work being an important part of it. But I think in general, it has been a very strong influence over the years.
Awesome. With that, thank you so much for spending these 3 hours with us on a Saturday.
Great. This has been great. Lovely. Thank you. It was great conversing with you, and thanks for having me on the show, and have had an opportunity to look at some of your early videos and earlier podcasts, and glad to join that group, and would love to see a lot more, and wishing you all the very best. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Awesome.